Jiang Haoyi was an ugly, disgusting, lonely loser that no one ever wanted to talk to, until one day, he suddenly became the harem king and made all the hot girls fall for him. But before he got there, Haoyi was getting chased by a mob until he fell to his death, where a pink goddess showed up and asked him if he had eaten Cupid's chocolates. Earlier that day, the school beauty, Zia, walked up to him and clasped his hand in hers, trembling as she brought his hand to her belly, and said that she was pregnant with his child. When he said that he didn't even know her, all the students turned into a furious mob and chased him down mercilessly. He promised to meet Zia on the rooftop later to talk about this, and ran as fast as his feet could take him. In the hallway, he managed to fight off all the guys in one swift motion, but he was powerless against the female students, who were ripped as fuck. Tang Xuan, the captain of the athletics team, slapped him out of jealousy. It turned out she was just as delusional as Zia, and started calling him her lover. As if that wasn't enough, a third girl named Ling Yuan came running and hugged him out of nowhere, begging him to come home to his kids. But Haoyi doesn't even know her, much less have her kids. The mob became even more furious and chased him all the way to the rooftop together with the two girls who claimed to be his lover. Confused and angry, Haoyi screamed at the top of his lungs that he didn't know any of these girls, and threatened to jump off as he stepped out on the ledge to prove his innocence. However, the mob didn't believe him and rushed forward to grab him, but this only made Haoyi let go of the railings. As he was falling to his death, a pillar of light descended from above, stopping time itself. Instead of hitting the ground with a wham, his body gently touched the ground as a pink goddess looked at him. She grabbed him by his collar and shook him as she screamed at him for eating Cupid's chocolates. This jogged Haoyi's memories about seeing a chocolate cake by itself on the rooftop yesterday, and bringing it to the girls for them to eat together. The love goddess, Maytada, explained that eating Cupid's chocolates with a girl would make them have false memories of being his lover, and proudly wished for his happiness. But to Haoyi, this situation meant that he was fucked for life. Maytada said that he only has to fulfill their most desired wish in order to lift the magic spell, and then he can go live as he wished. After that, time returned to normal, and the mob on the rooftop rushed downstairs to check for his body on the ground. As he hid from them, Haoyi remembered he was supposed to meet Zia on the rooftop hours earlier, and imagined the worst had happened. So he rushed back to the top and found her crying alone. The next day, he brought her to a clinic to get a pregnancy test, and pumped his fist up in the air in joy when he found out that the results were negative. This confused Zia, swearing she felt something had moved in her belly, and promised to make sure she got pregnant the next time. But Haoyi refused and offered to take her home instead. Later on, the two of them arrived in a wealthy mansion, where they were greeted by guards bowing their heads to them. Zia fondly recalled her false memory of Haoyi proposing to her in front of her parents and got rejected, saying she was grateful for his passionate feelings for her. Inside her mansion, Haoyi was surprised to hear from her housekeeper that she was living by herself because her father rarely came home after his business expanded. As he was about to leave, one of the house guards crashed into the living room after receiving a phone call from the school, saying that Haoyi knocked up their young miss. All the guards beat him up good, but Zia cried that she loved him and promised to marry him even if he were poor, and that she would do her best to get pregnant next time, making the guards drag back Haoyi to beat him up more. In order to escape them, she dragged him to her room and shut the door behind her. Haoyi pressed his hand against her lips to shut her up, because she kept riling the guards up unnecessarily. Realizing how close he was to her, he stumbled back to her desk, where he saw last year's calendar with her notes on how happy she was to eat with her father. This made Haoyi furious enough to blast the door open and grab the phone from the housekeeper, who was calling Zia's father. He screamed at the phone that he was the one who knocked up his daughter in order to force a meeting with him, but in response, her father just hung up the phone. As soon as he did, an army of helicopters and black cars arrived at the mansion, dropping off the master of the house himself. Haoyi trembled in fear as Zia's father appeared before him, accompanied by armed soldiers. He ordered the men to put their weapons away and beat Haoyi up, until Zia gave him the negative test results from the hospital, and became confused about his outburst on the phone. Haoyi trudged forward and stared up at her father as he said that if he hadn't taken the blame like that, he wouldn't even come home to his daughter, who needed his affection more than their luxurious house and all the gifts. Those words resonated with everyone present in that mansion, and with that, Haoyi took his leave. He ran until his chest heaved heavily, only to find out that he was just at the back door of her house. But Zia still appeared and thanked him with a kiss, before vanishing into thin air. Just then, Meitada made her entrance, perched on top of the ivy growing on the gate, and explained that he was able to break the spell by fulfilling her most desired wish. The next day at school, Haoyi slipped undetected into his classroom, or so he thought. Zia had come over his desk and asked him out on a date, so Haoyi blurted out Meitada's name and summoned her, stopping time once more. Meitada told him that although her false memories were now gone because the spell was broken, she still would remember what happened the past 2 days, and won't necessarily erase her present feelings. After she disappeared, Haoyi reluctantly agreed to a date with her, but then the door blew open and knives flew to his seat. A dark-haired girl, a young Zuli, thrusted a sword just inches away from his groin, and kissed him hard to mark her territory in front of Zia. Her mother was also there and threw a bag at her face to scold her for flying from America all the way there, just for some boy. The mother and daughter started glaring at each other as neither of them wanted to back off. The mother knocked her out and had her carried away by guards. Later on, Haoyi told Meitada that she was his wild childhood friend, and Zia overheard this even though she didn't see who he was talking to. She thought about canceling their date, worried about Zuli being his childhood sweetheart, but to her surprise, Haoyi wanted to continue their date for tomorrow. After that, Haoyi bumped into Shuin in the staircase, who slapped him out of the blue and broke up with him. This irritated him since they didn't actually know each other, and he hated the fact that a girl had more balls to break up with him first, and yelled that no one would take her with that attitude. When she left, Meitada advised him that when women say let's break up, they usually mean it as a warning, which left Haoyi thinking that he may have broken her heart so badly that she might isekai herself. But his assumptions were shattered when he saw Shuin mercilessly laying down the punishment on the losing group in her athletics team. He confronted her and tried to grab the hose from her hands, but it ended up drenching her in water. Instead of beating him up, she just grunted and walked away. The next day, Haoyi woke up late for his date, and got even more delayed when Zuli locked him in his room to make him stay home. He had to climb over to the next apartment, where he asked the little girl, Yuayu, to let him use her house door after bribing her with some sweets. He showed up late on their date, but Zia forgave him and invited him to go get a drink in the cafe. The mood was quiet and awkward, unlike the dreamy confession that Haoyi whipped up in his head. In his virgin imagination, Zia was a princess who gracefully and adorably handed a gift along with her confession of love to him while he was a prince. However, Zia was red from embarrassment because it was her first ever date, making Haoyi worried and pressed his hand on her forehead, asking if she had a fever. The moment they realized their faces were just inches from each other, they pulled away out of embarrassment and turned quiet again. Haoyi suggested they go to the anime festival to get rid of the awkwardness between them, but they were still tiptoeing around each other as they walked side by side, weaving through the crowd taking photos of cosplayers. To his surprise, Haoyi saw Shuin in a cute cat-made outfit, posing for the cameras. When she saw him and the girls from her athletics team from afar, she dragged him and Zia away from the crowd to a private room, where she told him how people seeing her in this cute outfit would destroy her school reputation of being the tough alpha woman. But Haoyi didn't understand her struggle and told her to show her true self to others. At that moment, the announcer said that the female cosplay competition was about to start through the speakers, but unfortunately for Shuin, she always went solo, so she was not qualified to enter. To solve this, Zia suggested that the three of them form a group to enter the competition, exciting Shuin, who turned the reluctant Haoyi into a cute trap bunny-made character. Zuli, who was hiding in another stall, snapped a photo of him from behind and was turned on by how cute he was. Shuin's shriek had Zia and Haoyi running to her, and discovered her costume was riddled with holes. It was an obvious sabotage, and as if that weren't bad enough, it was the very first outfit she made for herself, so it left her so heartbroken that she ran away. This spurred Haoyi to win the competition no matter what, but before that, he took a leak while coming up with their battle plan. Meitada suddenly appeared, curious to what he was up to, which shocked him because they were in the men's toilet. Her appearance gave him inspiration, and got her involved in the plan as well. On stage, Haoyi tripped in front of the audience out of nervousness, but was able to turn it into a cute act that all the simps fell for. Meanwhile, Zia searched frantically for Shuin all over the place, but couldn't find her anywhere at all. Later on at the main event, Haoyi stood alone on stage again after all his efforts to delay the performance, until Zia found Shuin, and sang the audience a little song, which they didn't appreciate because they wanted to see Shuin. Unknown to all of them, she was just above the stage, watching everything unfold with sad eyes. The boos from the audience inspired Haoyi to reveal how much pain she was in, just to hide her identity, but he confessed that he actually loved this side of her, because it felt the most real to him. As he called out to her, Xiuan fell from above, but before she hit bottom, a strange light transformed both her and Haoyi's outfit, and she fell right into his arms. The audience loved it so much that they were declared as the winners on the spot. Even though the competition was supposed to be all female, Maytada was able to save them in time through her magic, so she heaved a sigh of relief from above when she saw the two of them were okay. Xiuan was still skeptical about magic and asked Haoyi to explain what exactly happened, but he had no answer to offer her. Zuli was standing backstage about to rip them apart from jealousy when she overheard some girls talking about how cute Haoyi was and wanted him on their team. She dragged her huge blade behind her as she trudged towards them with a murderous look in her eyes. The girls went quiet as she approached them and shrieked when she slashed them. Haoyi and Xiuan met in the dressing room after the show and fought over who would get to change first. When Xiuan pushed him, both their clothes vanished, so she threw him out of the room, along with his casual clothes he wore earlier. After getting dressed, he thanked Maytada for saving them, making her blush. She thought it was strange the way the human mind works, as he looked at her with kind eyes. Later on, Zia shyly appeared in the hallway and asked if they could go home now. Haoyi couldn't believe that he had forgotten about her and invited Xiuan to come along with them. But she was at tsundere about it, so by the time she sorted out her feelings, she found nobody waiting outside her door. Meanwhile, Haoyi and Zia said their goodbyes at an intersection because Haoyi wanted to talk to Xiuan, making Zia a little jealous. When Xiuan finally came, he called out to her and asked her if she wanted to crash at his place for a while, which didn't go well considering she was at tsundere, and because he was an idiot who didn't even consider the context. He brushed her reaction off, thinking the spell had already been lifted anyway, and wished that she would just show her true self to others. Later that night, he went to visit a hot blonde woman's apartment. The blonde woman welcomed him, mentioning how long it has been since he last visited, and grabbed his hand to show him inside. The hot woman turned out to be his teacher Ms. Jai, and meeting with her had him going on a trip down memory lane. In the past, he and Zuli would always compete for the top grade, but she could never beat him, so she kept chasing and hitting him out of frustration. To escape her beatings, Haoyi purposely lowered his grade, making her smile and confident. But in middle school, she announced on a megaphone that if he didn't get the top score this time around, he would do everything she asked and go with her to America. Since he didn't want that, he did his best and claimed the top spot. Seeing how things turned out, Zuli thought he hated her and yelled that he'll regret this, as she ran away with tears in her eyes. Just then, Ms. Jai had passed out from all the beer she drank, and teased Haoyi the next day by calling him darling out in public. At school, Haoyi visited Xiuan during her team's training session, and made a ridiculous bet against all the girls on her team. The condition was that he had to get the top score in the whole school, and if he won, they would do all as he said. This hit the ego of the girls on the athletics team, and showered him with insults as they proudly accepted his bet, thinking it would be an easy win for them, considering one of their members was part of the top 5. Haoyi wasn't the least bit intimidated by their confidence, and riled them up even more. Starting from that moment, he studied as hard as he can, reading piles of books even into the night. On the day before the exam, he saw Zuli standing alone in the rain outside his window, mumbling he's back, so Haoyi took an umbrella and rushed down to see her. Her confidence was crushed as she trembled before him, feeling all worthless because her ex-boyfriend was back. He wiped the tears streaming down her face and assured her that everything would be fine. He wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close to his chest, letting go of the umbrella as they got drenched in the midnight rain. After that, her mother thanked him for taking care of her and informed him that Zuli was a bit unstable at the moment and would not be attending school for a while. The next day, the rain had stopped, and Haoyi zipped through the exams like it was nothing, annoying the girls from the athletics team. On the day the test results were about to be released, Haoyi proudly entered the gym where the athletics team were training, and showed them the maid outfit that he wanted Xiuan to wear for 2 weeks when they lost the bet, shocking Xiuan enough for her to let go of the ball in her hand. All this time, she was worried about how tired Haoyi was from all the studying and was stumped by what could be the reason behind him suddenly making that bet. But now that it was all clear, she was left dumbfounded. When they all looked at the results, they were shocked to see Haoyi ranked first, and screamed at him, calling him a pervert and a cheat. They even had the faculty confirm his grades, but were disappointed to know that he didn't really cheat. When the girls were gone, the teacher commented about how Haoyi got the entire faculty startled at his sudden rise in the top spot in the school, and didn't realize that he had that kind of potential. At the gym, the students were losing their heads over Xiuan's cute maid outfit, as she cheerfully gave away posters to recruit new members to her team. The crowd were practically drooling at her as they took pictures and were dying each time she flashed them an adorable smile. Haoyi put his hands on her shoulders and gave her a bit of a push to make her more confident about dressing up that way in front of the school. He even declared that she would be dressing like that for 2 weeks because in his mind, this would ease her into the kind of reputation that would balance her tough personality with this new cute side. Meanwhile, Lin Yuing watched them with jealousy from the back, whispering to herself that Haoyi had forgotten her and his kids. At the rooftop, Xia dropped by in the middle of Haoyi and Mei Tada's conversation about the spell being broken. Of course, she still wasn't able to see the goddess and looked straight at Haoyi, who played it cool by lying that he just wanted to chill at the rooftop because he was feeling hot. Xiuan made an entrance by throwing the maid outfit Haoyi gave to her to his face and said that the size was too small, and Xia, who had picked it out for her, slipped away in embarrassment, leaving the two of them alone. Haoyi acted all cute to escape her anger, making Xiuan chuckle. As she turned around, she expressed how happy he made her feel, even though it was a bit perverted. After that, in the hallway, Mei Tada asked Haoyi who was the guy that Zuli was talking about last night in the rain. He revealed that the guy she was mumbling about was her ex-boyfriend, and that she wouldn't have ended up the way she was now if it weren't for him. After their conversation, 2 kids ran up behind him, calling him daddy as they pushed him down the floor. Behind them stood Lin Yuing, who was grinning at her kids and at Haoyi, who was supposed to be their father. The impossible has happened to Haoyi because he was virgin as fuck. It shocked him enough for his soul to leave his body, but Mei Tada threw him back to face reality. The 2 children, Xiao Ming and Xiao Hong, looked like carbon copies of Haoyi and Lin Yuan as they stared up at Haoyi with big innocent eyes. Haoyi knelt down to them and told them to call him Uncle Jiang when they were outside, and that he would meet them at the school gate with their mother, promising to give them sweets in return. When they were gone, Mei Tada explained that if enough time had passed, the magic would begin to fulfill the person's wishes, making their fantasy and delusions become real, which meant that the 2 children were created by magic and gained physical form. At the school gate, Yuan received a phone call telling her to come to the office, so she instructed the kids to stay put, while she went to follow the order, but the kids decided to play around and got separated. Later on, she apologized to Haoyi for losing the kids, but he reassured her that nothing bad would happen to them, and that they should split up to go look for them. Outside the school building, Xia found the little girl, Xiao Hong, and helped her look for her Uncle Jiang, without knowing that it was actually Haoyi. Meanwhile, the little boy, Xiao Ming, was stirring up trouble all over the school, pretending to be a hero defeating demons, and ended up sneaking inside the girls' dressing room. Haoyi saw him through a slit in the door, and thought that he'd get in trouble again and walked away. But Tang Xuan caught him and accused him of being a pervert. Soon enough, the entire school was onto him again, but thinking he could help, Xiao Ming rushed to his rescue, but ended up pulling down Xuan's skirt instead. Xuan took this out on Haoyi and had the girls punish him. Meanwhile, Yuan waited patiently at the school gate until the crowd thinned out and she was left all alone. But at the horizon, Haoyi appeared with both kids safely at his side. Mei Tada spawned behind him, praising him for doing well as she pounded her fists lightly at his back, but he told her that a shoulder rub would be more comfortable. Unable to see the goddess, Yuan thought that he meant to request it from her, and got up to massage him, so Haoyi brought up a different topic to change the mood. He made her see sense by asking her to do simple math based on the kids' ages. If they were born 7 to 8 years ago, that would make him and Yuan 12 years old when they had them. But Yuan didn't see the problem in that, and still believed that they were their kids. Mei Tada explained that if this continued, then all of the people she would be interacting with will also be affected by the magic and blur their memories. That was definitely the case when Yuan's mother, Xiao Xin, threw a sharp knife above his head the moment they arrived at the door. She grabbed his collar and threatened him to address her properly as mother, not ma'am, as she waved the dangerous blade around, calling him a scoundrel for not coming for several days. He was invited inside to eat with them in their small and shabby apartment. After dinner, Haoyi and Yuan were cleaning up when their hands brushed each other, making them blush and shy away from each other. When their chores were done, Haoyi helped the kids with their assignments and got them to sleep as Yuan told them to. At the living room, Haoyi was listening to the evening news when Yuan showed up in a short nightgown and invited him to sleep, since it looked like her mother was not coming home. But he was saved by a phone call from Xia, who asked him to go out on a date at Heiju Amusement Park on Sunday. Haoyi agreed, but Yuan, who overheard this, made him promise to take her and the kids there as well. Caught off guard by this sudden responsibility, he agreed reluctantly and called Xia to cancel their date. But he remembered her housekeeper's words about her being lonely all the time, and lied that he wouldn't be late this time, which made her very happy. On Sunday, Haoyi was determined to make both dates successful, and planned to start the operation an hour apart from each other. At 9:00 a.m., he took Yuen and the kids to the Ferris wheel, but was scared of how high it was, and hugged a random lady's leg in fear, provoking her boyfriend and earning Yuen's disgust. After the ride, he speed ran all the amusement park rides in 30 minutes with them, and got so sick that he had to throw up at a nearby bulletin board. When he was done, Maytada showered him with snacks to encourage him, but he waved it off and rushed to his and Zia's meeting spot action movie style. He thought she'd be late like an average girl would, but surprisingly, she was already waiting for him by the fountain. Judging by her shy reaction, Haoyi suspected that she was going to confess her feelings to him, but they got interrupted by a street photographer who wanted to take their photo. Both of them were acting awkwardly towards each other, so the photographer asked them to be more intimate, assuming them to be a couple. Zia pressed her chest to Haoyi to pose for the camera, but her hat was blown by the wind. When Haoyi caught it for her, Zia stood on her toes to kiss him. A few hours later, he wondered if it was Cupid's Chocolates effect again, but Maytada called him a dumbass moron, because Cupid's Chocolates had nothing to do with Zia's feelings for him. After looking at the time, Haoyi rushed to find a gift but ended up running into Zhang Dong, an old friend, who told him that Duyu's, Zuli's ex-boyfriend, was back from America. Even though he liked her, Dong made Haoyi swear to protect Zuli this time, so Yuz wouldn't hurt her again. Just then, Haoyi ran into Xuyuan, who was out shopping with her girls and got into an argument with her. And if that wasn't enough, Zia was calling him on his phone. With his life at stake, Haoyi asked Xuyuan to keep Zia company, while he returned to Yuen with a stuffed teddy bear to make the kids happy. To cheer them up, he entered with them in a parent-child quiz to win them the prize. Haoyi crushed all the questions so hard, his competition had given up and even the host got intimidated. He ended up winning the prize, which was just a meal voucher, and bought the kids ice cream with it. As they watched them from the corner, Yuen and Haoyi shared an intimate talk over a drink and ice cream. Yuen commented how sweet it was for him to look after the kids, even though he had no income, and that he was also introverted like a certain someone she knew. Haoyi didn't let that slip-up pass him by, and quickly figured out that the person she was referring to was her father. He asked her where her father was, bringing tears to her eyes as she slammed the table in anger. She never answered the question, and went shopping with the kids somewhere to avoid discussion. Zia and Yuen, who were walking nearby, saw Haoyi with her and was concerned by how red her eyes had been, as if she had been crying. They immediately assumed it was his fault, and strung him up to interrogate him. But when they found out that he was only trying to help her, they let him go out of concern for her. As the two girls watched him leave by bus, Yuen asked Zia if she was okay to let him go like that and be with another girl. Zia replied that Haoyi was a compassionate guy and Yuen needed help, so she couldn't have stopped him even if she wanted to. Meanwhile, Haoyi apologized to Yuen for crossing the line earlier with her. She understood that he was only looking out for her and smiled. Haoyi waved the photographer to them and asked him to take a group photo of them. The photographer recognized him and was even surprised to hear the kids call him daddy, making him assume that he was cheating on his wife with the pretty girl from earlier. At home, Yuen thanked him for what he did, but warned him never to mention anything like that in front of the kids, as her eyes dug deep into his soul like a knife. Looking once more at their group photo, Haoyi remembered Maytada's words, that false memories often have some connection to reality, making him determined to investigate the people around Yuen to know the truth. The next day, he went to Yuen's elementary school and tried to find her homeroom teacher by barging into the faculty room like an idiot. As expected, the entire faculty was hostile towards him and was about to beat him up, but he managed to slip away and bumped into Yuen's homeroom teacher in the hallway. She told him that when she was a student teacher, Yuen's father would always come pick her up after classes, and that Yuen herself was a cheerful and outgoing kid. But one day, her father left her with just a reminder to be a good girl, and turned his back, never to return again. Apparently, her parents got divorced, sending Yuen to a spiral of depression and cut off from the world. Hearing all this, Haoyi asked her for Yuen's father's address, but obviously failed. As a last resort, he decided to break into the police station to gather data on him. He started sneaking around, turning off the lights to blind the guard, creepily opening the door, and sneaking behind him to get to the files. Naturally, that didn't end well, at least if he didn't actually know the guard stationed there. The guard, Yan, was a close friend of his and helped him access Yuan's records, but both of them were surprised that there was no trace of her father in their data. He told Haoyi that this usually meant that they may have left the country, so Haoyi asked Yan to call him if he found anything else. After returning home, he found his parents waiting at the dinner table with a serious expression, warning him that they would come knocking on their door soon. Moments later, limousines ominously arrived in front of their apartment, and Zuli blasted the door open. She took off her gloves, as she didn't even hesitate to drag Haoyi in front of his parents towards his room, where she pushed him against the bed, wanting to sleep together. Haoyi escaped to the bathroom for a few hours, waiting for her to fall asleep, and when she did, he pulled the blanket close to her chest, remembering the time when Zuli gifted him sweets because she liked him. When he decided to pull an all-nighter on his cold bedroom floor, Yan suddenly called him to tell him that he found 20 possible contact numbers of Yujia, exciting him enough to wake Zuli. The next day at class, Haoyi called the numbers that Yan listed for him, hearing a bunch of crazy people on the other end of the line as he moved from one number to the next. The last number on the list belonged to Yujia, but he didn't bother to pick it up when Haoyi called it the first time. Later that day, after getting some shut-eye, Haoyi called his number again, and this time he picked it up while he was in the grocery store. He startled him by introducing himself as his son-in-law and casually told him that he and Yuan already have 2 kids, provoking him to come home. But Yujia just gave him an unexpected truth bomb. Yuan was not actually his real daughter, and Haoyi's heart dropped the moment he heard this. It looked like the situation was beyond him now, but he decided to push forward and ask her mother instead. At their apartment, he overheard them arguing behind the open door. Zin screamed at her to throw Yujia's picture away, because his real father was long dead, but this only made Yuan run away in tears with her children in tow. The next thing Haoyi knew, he was locked out of the apartment, with Zin refusing to even talk to him. So seeing this commotion, an old lady approached him to tell him what he wanted to know. Once he knew everything, he was overcome with grief and regrets as he told Meitada the truth behind Yuan's family. Yuan's real father, Xiaohe, was a police officer. On the day of their civil wedding, he was called in because of an emergency situation. Zin waited for him full of hope as she was expecting a child with him, but her heart was crushed when he returned to her in a coffin. He had died in the line of duty, and Lin Yujian, who used to be in love with her, took care of her and even married her, even though his parents were so against it that they disowned him. After shouldering years of his parents' disappointment, he eventually broke down and divorced Zin with tears in his eyes. Yuan, who only ever knew him as her father, was so heartbroken by this that years later, she still yearned for his love. Haoyi didn't even know what to do now that he knew all this. On the other hand, Meitada pointed out how Yujia still kept his personal phone's number for them after all these years, because in his heart, he still worried for them. This only made Haoyi erupt in anger at all of them. He was mad at Xiaohe for committing to marriage even when he knew his job could take his life at any time. And he was mad at Yujia for not seeing through his marriage and just left when things got bad for him. Meitada disagreed by how he saw things, and argued that just because police officers have dangerous jobs, doesn't mean that they don't have the right to have a family. He praised Yujia for taking on the burden of a shattered family, and raised Yuan as if she was his own for many years out of his own love. But Haoyi wasn't willing to hear all that, and went home with a sour look on his face, locking himself up in his room without having dinner with his own family. He even threw his stuff on the floor out of anger, but when he saw his framed group photo with Yuan and the kids fall to the floor as well, he sunk to the ground and realized how much of an idiot he was to be venting out his anger on his parents and Meitada, who overheard his apology through the open window and tried cheering him up. The next day, Haoyi called Yujia again to tell him that he understood the situation now, and reminded him not to give up so easily as a man. After all, Yuan still wished for his love and Zin struggled to pull her family together. Yujia wasn't ready for this conversation and hung up, but Haoyi called him again and again, despite how many times he was turned away. One day, he and Yuan picked up the kids from school to go painting scenery, but as they were crossing the street, trouble awaited them. Truck Kun took a break from Isekai Ying people and crashed straight into Yuan. Moments later, ambulances arrived to take away the victims. As this was happening, Yujia received a call from Haoyi telling him that Yuan got into a car accident, startling him from his seat. Afraid that he would never see her again, Yujia jumped into his car and drove to the hospital, only to find the hospital bed empty as the doctor shook his head and muttered how young the patient was. He thought she was now gone forever, and regretted how he never came home all this time. as bitter tears ran down his face. But just then, Yuen appeared behind him, surprised to see him after so many years. Her memory of him had gone hazy, but her heart remembered who he was and ran to his arms, wrapping him tightly in a warm embrace. Meanwhile, in the other room, Haoyi woke up wounded on a hospital bed, remembering how he pushed Yuen out of the way just in time before the truck collided with her, and how Maytada looked at him with tears in her eyes as she stopped the truck with her powers. Xia and Shun greeted him when he woke up, but he fell asleep almost instantly, and had a dream of Xiao Ming and Xiao Hong getting off a carousel and giving him a drawing of all their memories together. They tearfully said their goodbyes as they hugged him one last time before the magic that created them vanished into thin air. When he woke up once more, Yuen was at his bed waiting for him to open his eyes. A month later, the hospital finally let him go, thinking it was going to be the start of a great day. Haoyi immediately stepped on shit, and all of his harem stepped out of their own cars to pick him up, creating a battlefield atmosphere. To escape them, Haoyi snuck out the back, but ended up falling into Zuli's trap and got taken away in her limousine. However, the competition didn't end there just yet, because later on, the girls planned to give him soup to help him recover in their own ways, and met each other in the hallway. Caught in a four-way deadlock, the girls raced to his side, only to be disappointed and shocked to see Haoyi naked with another man.
Sensational.
Jing Dong happened to be there to help him apply ointment, but Haoyi was being a bitch about it, causing the scene to look like something out of a doujinshi. The girls continued to fight over whose soup should Haoyi eat first, after presenting him one impressive dish after another. His twin neighbors, Tao Tao and Yuen, came over after smelling the appetizing scent of the soups, giving him the idea to make them finish all the dishes. Alone at his room, Dong helped him change into his clothes, telling him how intense his harem was, and asked him why he wasn't going out with Zuli even though he has always loved her, and that she was loving him like crazy now. Haoyi frowned as he told him that he didn't want to be a substitute for her, and asked him to meet him outside after he was done changing. After Dong had left, Maytada showered Haoyi with snacks, as she cried to him about how she caused the fighting couple to break up with her magic. Zuli barged into his room after hearing her voice from behind the door, and tore the place apart to look for her. The other girls joined in to confront him, but when Maytada was discovered, she tried to stop time. But her magic only changed the girls' outfits a few times. She eventually made them temporarily forget the incident, and later on cried how she might turn into a mortal as her magic power grew weaker because Haoyi's chocolate incident had dragged on too long. Before he could leave the room, the television announced that the famous idol Sandy had collapsed and went into a coma after uttering Haoyi's name. Apparently, she was one of the girls who ate the chocolate and was now head over heels for him. But there was something different about her. Unlike the other girls, Sandy could manipulate reality itself by being able to use magic. She summoned Haoyi to a different realm, where she greeted him with her beautiful singing voice. Haoyi asked her who he was for her, and was surprised by her magnetic force, as she replied that he was her lover, the co-owner of her dreams, and the one she wanted to bring into her new world. She took him to a rooftop and invited him to jump with her, but Haoyi didn't want to follow her delusion and offered his hand so that he could bring her back to reality. Instead, Sandy took him with her as she leapt off the building and sprouted magical wings, welcoming him to her world. Fantasy and reality became mixed up when Sandy forcefully dragged Haoyi to see her world from the back of a giant paper airplane. Creatures under the sea swam freely across the blue skies, giant cats slept on top of the city buildings, and even the heavens broke apart into blocks when she willed it. Maytada told Haoyi they were inside her imaginary world, so he should calm his shit down, but that was not enough to reassure him, especially when he got thrown off to a giant tree and saw a portal to another dimension in its hollow. Sandy invited him to go to another world, but he was afraid he wouldn't be able to remain human if he crossed dimensions, and suggested they buy ice cream instead. However, their adventures didn't end with their cold dairy dessert, and Haoyi got transported to an aquarium, where surprisingly, he could breathe underwater as if he were in air. All sorts of underwater creatures swam all around him, as Sandy held his hand, marveling at the scenery before them. But this only made her sad. Besides the two of them, she had nobody else in this world, no one to share all these beautiful moments with. When they rose to the surface, Sandy asked him again if he wanted to leave with her and go to the other world. But Haoyi slipped away from her grip and looked at her with sad eyes. Tears started streaming down her face as her world broke apart and lost color. To prevent her from self-destructing, Haoyi suggested that they leave for the other world together tomorrow, putting a temporary smile on Sandy's face. Back in reality, Maytada told him she was concerned about his decision because the Sandy they met earlier was just her soul, and her body was still unconscious in the hospital. So that meant if her soul crossed to the other world, she wouldn't be able to go back and her body would become lifeless. Naturally, that didn't sit well with Haoyi, so he wanted some time to think about what to do to make her want to stay in the real world. Later that night, after he got out of the shower, Sandy was waiting for him on his bed and gave him the song she wrote for him for being her #1 supporter from the very beginning. He couldn't accept her gift, knowing full well that he wasn't actually the one in her memories, but she gave it to him anyway and left through the window. Maytada became even more concerned now because it looked like Sandy wasn't willing to wait until tomorrow to cross over, so she agreed to Haoyi's risky plan, daring to lose everything that made her a love goddess. In the imaginary world, Sandy waited for Haoyi by the portal in the hollow of the enchanted tree, and sank into his arms as soon as she saw him. But her bright eyes dimmed the moment he said that he won't come with her, but instead, he wanted to bring her back with him to reality. She wanted to escape the pain and ugliness of the real world by crossing over to the other side, where she believed only beautiful and pure things reside. However, Haoyi told her that beauty and ugliness exist together no matter which world she goes to, and that was something she needed to accept. Hearing this broke Sandy and shattered all her expectations about Haoyi, screaming that he was not the loyal supporter that she knew, so she leapt to the portal with tears in her eyes. Haoyi screamed as he followed her to the other side, going through a tunnel of memories, showing how a young boy met a younger Sandy, whose real name was Yushin. At the end of the tunnel, he was confused by the other world that Sandy had imagined, because it was nothing like she envisioned. It was pitch black, and death surrounded them in a vast plain of nothingness. Sandy cried and sank to her knees, so Haoyi offered his hand and revealed to her everything about the love goddess, and how the girls he met through her found happiness in their miserable lives. This was enough for her to be convinced that it was possible for her to find happiness back in the real world, and put her faith in his words. Back in reality, Haoyi called up Lin Yuan, asking her to write up a news article about Sandy coma, and how her agency wasn't even worried about her one bit. He had Zia use her vast network to spread the news online, gathering sympathies from the public. He also asked Xiuan to spark their hearts directly by using her popularity to gather her fans and stage a protest. Then he went to meet Luji, Sadie's real childhood friend, and got him to spill his story. He told Haoyi that Sandy was his next-door neighbor, whom he befriended because everyone thought she was a weirdo, and encouraged her to show off her singing because she had always been good at that. Eventually, she landed a contract with an agency, who strictly limited her social contact and paid him good money to keep her company. He went crazy from the guilt of helping to keep her in a cage, and from being cut off from the rest of people their age, because they saw him as a freak like her. On the day his contract with the agency was to be renewed, he broke down from all his repressed feelings and quit his job. He started screaming that he doesn't want to be her babysitter anymore and wanted to live his own life, without knowing that she was actually listening behind the door. He was filled with regret and grief from that outburst, and all his emotions started exploding inside of him, now that he knew Sandy was thinking about her own death. Haoyi let Agent Wang, the guy in charge of Sandy, hear a recording of Ji telling his story, and threatened to end his career by exposing him. But he couldn't care less as he sipped his coffee. However, this was only the beginning of Haoyi's plan. Wang received an urgent call, telling him that Ji's parents arrived and were trying to stop Sandy's contract renewal, making him take Haoyi's threats more seriously and asked for his price. But he only asked him to return Sandy's freedom and give her the opportunity to live her life and make friends. However, Wang laughed and said that she was lucky he let her have one friend, given how much of a freak she was. But as he stood to leave, Haoyi showed him the photos of his mistress and threatened to tell his wife about his affair. Meanwhile, Zia excitedly waited for Haoyi's call to reward her for doing his request, but her phone instead rang to remind her of her grandfather's birthday. Just then, the television reported that Sandy woke up from her coma and was so full of energy that she even grabbed the camera and screamed for Haoyi to come see her. Outside the hospital, a swarm of reporters and helicopters were guarding the entrance to snap a picture of Haoyi, but he snuck, pretending to be a random guy wheeling an old woman in the hospital. After weaving through them, he arrived at Sandy's hospital room and introduced him to the love goddess as promised. Maytada magically appeared before her and took her on a one-day trip around the world. As the two of them were perched on top of the Stonehenge, she talked about Haoyi's chocolate incident and how the chocolates were made in the first place. In the past, love goddesses used a bow and arrow, But when someone made chocolates using memory magic, they partnered up with each other to make the love business more efficient. All of this was possible thanks to the person she called director, who she said was handsome and brilliant. Meitada also eased her worries about living in the real world, and told her that everyone would love to see and hear the real her, including Haoyi, who put in so much effort to clear her troubles and supported her. After her magical trip, Sandy appeared in front of the media, thanking her fans for their support, and told them that she would be studying abroad after coming to an agreement with the agency. But before that, she would be holding a concert for them. On the night of the concert, Luigi knocked on her door backstage, carrying a bouquet of roses in his arms, and apologized for hurting her. Sandy held his hand as he forgave him, and asked him if they could be real friends, now that the lies are all gone. Touched by her kindness, Luigi agreed to be friends with her, and promised that he would always have her back no matter what. Meanwhile, Haoyi and Meitada were at the audience seats after Sandy gave them free tickets, waiting for her to come up on stage excitedly. When she took the stage, they were blown away by her new song because it was all about how her life changed because of Cupid's chocolates. As she reached the end of her song, Sandy held Haoyi's hand and pressed her lips close to his ear, whispering her thanks as all the cameras caught a close-up of him. The next day, he hid under the bushes to get away from all the angry fans who wanted to beat him up, from Zuli who wanted to cut him down from jealousy, and from the reporters who wanted to milk him for details. Just as everything seemed hopeless, Miss Jai appeared in front of him lugging behind a suitcase, and asked her to save him, offering to be her servant for 3 months in exchange. She took him to Cafe Time, a high-end looking cafe in Beijing Road, and asked the old man at the counter to let him stay there as a favor, which he agreed to. Having been sleep-deprived from all the running he did last night, he crashed into a nearby couch to get some shut-eye, but he was startled awake when he realized that a beautiful white-haired man sat across him from the table. He had a mysterious aura about him as he asked Haoyi what troubled him, but Haoyi never bothered to question anything about him. The man took an interest in him and gave him a fancy-looking box of candies before he left. Haoyi wanted to introduce him to Zia, who immediately came to the cafe after worrying about him because of what happened at the concert. But when he got back to the table after fetching her, he was long gone. Meanwhile, Meitada was bitter about Haoyi jumping back to his normal happy self without her help, and went to sulk at the dock, where she met Director Roos, the boss of Cupid's chocolate-making factory, and the enigmatic white-haired man from earlier. Even though he wasn't part of the administration of the Cupid's palace, he warned her about the consequences of breaking the Cupid's contract by showing herself in front of a mortal, but decided to help her anyway by casting a spell on her to help her control her magic, on the condition that she wouldn't intervene any longer in the humans' affairs. While this was happening, Zia and Haoyi went on an unexpected date, going shopping, winning games at the arcade, and even taking pictures in a photo booth. But on their way home, they were ambushed by a group of thugs led by one of the girls who sabotaged Xiuyin's dress at the anime festival. Instead of backing down, Haoyi showed off his kung fu skills and defeated all of them with speed and precision, until the police showed up to arrest them. When Zia told him how impressed she was by his moves, the officer taking their statement said that it was only natural. After all, Haoyi was the son of the police chief. However, Haoyi walked away immediately with his eyebrows creased, thinking about how he hated police officers. When he and Zia were alone on the playground, he told her about his past, about him wanting to become a police officer just like his parents. But all of that changed eventually. Because of their job, his parents were often too busy to take care of him, and he had to spend his birthdays and holidays alone. Even when criminals attacked their home, they never went to his rescue because they were working on another case elsewhere. But a little ray of light appeared in his life when he met Miss Jai. She took care of him as if he were her own family, and even tried to patch things up between him and his parents. And although he loved her for what she did, it barely changed anything in his life, so he tried to act like he had a warm, loving family in front of her. Hearing his story, Zia broke into tears and hugged him, telling him that he was there to help her and the other girls in their lowest points, so she wanted to be there for him to realize his own dream. Haoyi hugged her back tightly, whispering thank you in her ear very softly. Watching this touching scene from afar, Meitada also broke into tears as she flew away, and wondered why she was feeling a sharp pain in her chest from seeing the two of them get so close. As she worried about her future without Haoyi, Krog, her old admirer from the God Realm whom she rejected so many times, appeared next to her to bring her back home. But Meitada refused, telling him that she has to find the girl who put the chocolate cake on the rooftop and started all this mess in the first place. But in reality, she just wanted to stay by Haoyi's side. Meanwhile, Zia and Xiuan met at the anime festival once again. But this time, Xiuan introduced her to her new teammates for the cosplay competition and excitedly put on her costume, making Zia proud of her for having friends to cosplay with now. Unfortunately, Xiuan left the crown for her costume back at the school, so she rushed to get it despite the heavy rain outside. But when she was running late, Zia offered to enter the competition dressed as a maid to buy her time, and called Haoyi to ask him to get Xiuan's crown at school. At campus, Haoyi ran into Meitada on his way back to Xiuan, and was surprised that she embraced him with tears in her eyes. She thought that he was in love with Zia after their moment in the playground, and didn't want to go back to the God Realm. But Haoyi told her that he and Zia were not in a relationship, making her snap out of her depression and got excited enough to agree to help him with Xiuan's problem. All alone at the bus stop, Xiuan was about ready to give up when she realized that it was already her team's turn to take the stage. But Haoyi arrived and put her crown on her head. He carried her to the anime festival on his back, while Zia acted out a cringy fantasy scene on stage as the maid Shauna, to buy her time. Zia eventually made her dramatic entrance to the stage and continued the act to impress the audience. She kissed Zia's forehead and wrapped her arm around her as she pointed her sword to the sky, swearing she'll defeat the evil King Dorsa as part of her act as Queen Dorothy. The audience roared with excitement, their cameras flashing rapidly to capture every moment. After the event, Xiuan thanked Zia for her help, giving her the maid dress she loved deeply. Haoyi convinced her to accept it, as he showered her with praises, and soon enough both of them were in their own little world, making Xiuan a little out of place and disappeared to leave them alone. Back at his home, Haoyi's rest was interrupted by a package delivery, but when he opened the door, he got buried underneath a mountain of boxes. Meitada was excited that all her packages had arrived, telling Haoyi that these were all snacks for his school camping trip soon. But this only stressed him out when he was packing his stuff at school, because most of those snacks can't be used as proper meals. In the middle of that, Zia entered the classroom and asked him to write his name on a piece of paper with a red smudge on the corner, telling him it was for a draw for the groupings later. Apparently, it was all part of Xiuan's plan to make sure that she would be grouped with Zia and Haoyi during camping, but Lin Yuan overheard this and planned to mess up the lots using a red marker. During the official draw, Xiuan was surprised to see multiple papers with a red smudge on the corner, so she ended up grabbing all of them, making Zia, Haoyi, and Yuan her group members. On their way to the camping site, the girls kept fighting over who would get to be closer and spend more time with Haoyi. Xiuan was in full support of shipping Haoyi with Zia and kept derailing Yuan's plans to have some alone time with him, despite her own romantic feelings for him. But Yuan was not going to back down easily, and prepared some cold dishes that she said would be better for digestion during a camping trip, and shut down all the other food options that Zia had, because she was a woman of science, and she was more than willing to use it as a weapon for love. Haoyi decided to eat both their food to calm them down, but a sudden call from Zuli telling him that she'd be coming to where he was now rattled his very soul. As soon as she hung up, a helicopter flew over their heads, and Zuli descended to the ground dramatically, along with a mountain of heavy duffel bags. She immediately marked her territory like an alpha woman, and chased Xiuan around with a sword when she wouldn't bend to her will. Their fight caused the embers from the bonfire to scatter and burn the camp, setting fire everywhere. But Zuli didn't care and continued to chase after her. While Haoyi and Yuan tried to put out the fire by themselves, Zia went to the river to get water, but the current was too strong and swept her away, along with Xiuan, who came to her rescue. However, this wasn't enough to make Zuli see sense and got slapped by Yuan, who shut her down with just her words. Yuan warned her that Haoyi would never forgive her if something happened to Zia and Xiuan because of her actions. When Haoyi came back after dark with both girls safe, Zuli pressed her face against his chest, crying as she begged for his forgiveness. Haoyi had a gentle expression on his face as he hugged her back. Seeing this scene made Zia realize how much Zuli loved him, making her sad again because she didn't want to get in the way between him and his childhood sweetheart. Once the group had settled down around a new bonfire, Haoyi thanked Yuan for finding them and for taking good care of Zuli, putting a smile on her face after she gave him a canned soda. The group toasted to their safety, thankful that everything had been resolved, but their troubles were far from over. Meitada watched them from a distance, disappointed in herself for not being able to do anything even though she followed them there. Her eyes welled up with tears as she thought that Haoyi didn't need her anymore. Meanwhile, Yuan pulled out 2 sleeping bags because their tents got burnt, and she suggested that they share them. The girls were quick to understand the situation, or rather the opportunity presented to them. Haoyi wanted the girls to take both sleeping bags, and he would sleep on the cold ground at first, but they convinced him to take one sleeping bag, since he saved all of them and wanted to repay his kindness. But Zuli was a little more shameless, and nudged him to sleep together. The group ended up spreading the sleeping bags to create one big mat for them to all sleep together under the stars. Zia turned to her side out of jealousy from seeing Zuli casually snuggling up to Haoyi, who only blushed as she wrapped her arms around him in her sleep. Haoyi and the girls woke up to a fresh morning, but soon after opening his eyes, Zuli and Shuin were already at each other's necks, arguing about how Zuli was being too flirty with him. Things got heated up when Zuli cut Zia's dress with a stray branch because she got in the way of her fight. And to make matters worse, Yuan fainted from a fever she caught from yesterday's incident, while she was looking at the map to guide their group to the class campsite later. As Zuli watched Haoyi place his hand over Yuan's forehead, she remembered what Yuan said to her last night, and thought that he would hate her for causing all this. After all, she was the reason the tent caught on fire yesterday, and even got the other two girls to nearly drown in the river while she was at it. As this thought ran through her head, a helicopter suddenly lowered her mother down to them, demanding she return with her this instant. Like her daughter, she was willing to use force if necessary, but surprisingly, Zuli agreed to go with her without complaint, and even asked her to take Yuan with them to the hospital. After that chaotic camping trip, Haoyi wanted to relax at home, but found himself cleaning meticulously after Zia said that she would be coming over to return his clothes, which she used to cover up her ripped dress during the incident with Zuli. When he heard someone at the door, he immediately opened it thinking it was her, but embarrassed the shit out of him when he found out it was just Zhang Dong. He tried to shut the door on him, but Zhang Dong put his hand and foot through the gap.
Open the door or I'm gonna throw rocks through your windows, you dumb
Leaving Haoyi no choice but to welcome him in as a guest. Zhang Dong asked him what he planned to reply to Zuli's feelings for him, especially since her ex-boyfriend Duyu's Zhang was back. But Haoyi was still unsure about what to do, provoking him to shove him against the wall out of anger. He told him that he was only hurting Zuli with his passive attitude, and that he'd end up hurting Zia too, since not giving them a proper answer was just like playing with their emotions. With the door fully open, Zia overheard and saw everything, making things awkward enough for Zhang Dong to leave them after his outburst. Despite the tense atmosphere, Haoyi tried his best to make Zia comfortable by smiling it all away, but now she was curious about Zhang Dong and their relationship with Zuli. Haoyi told her that when they were kids, he and Zuli often spent time together as neighbors because his parents were always gone. He looked back at those memories as the warmest and happiest times he has spent with her. But as time passed, Zuli changed and became more competitive with him, making him feel more distant because he thought that she didn't truly enjoy his company. During middle school, there was already a huge rift between them, but Zhang Dong was the one who bridged that gap and filled the void created by the awkwardness between them with his energetic personality, and eventually completed their trio. However, things got all messy again after Zuli started dating Duyu's and spent most of their time together, with their arms linked together wherever they went. When she paraded him in front of them, she acted all flirty and even pretended that she didn't know Haoyi just to rub it in his face. On the night of the New Year's party, Duyu's declared to the entire school that he was engaged to his girlfriend Momo, and tossed Zuli aside, telling everyone that she was just acting like his girlfriend when they weren't even in a relationship. The students, who always thought that she was an arrogant bitch, started calling her shameless and avoided her at school. After getting publicly dumped, she fell into a spiral of depression, which got so bad that she had to quit school and locked herself up in her room. Ever since then, she developed a yandere personality and went love crazy for Haoyi. In fact, when he visited her one day, Zuli had a crazy look on her face as she gave him a sloppy kiss, telling him that she would devote all her love to him as she should have been doing all along. After hearing this emotionally charged story, Zia suspected if Haoyi only ever saw Zuli as a friend. The next day, Haoyi visited Yuan in the hospital, carrying a basket full of fruits at Zuli's request, and told her that Zuli couldn't come because her mother was guarding her like a hawk. He was glad that Zuli finally found a friend in Yuan, and told her that whatever she said to her that night definitely made an impact on her, without knowing that both her and Zuli did it only because they didn't want him to hate them. At school, Zuli intentionally clung to him like a leech to chase Zia away, and kept him up to date about where she was through text as he instructed, thinking that he was finally paying attention to her romantically, when in reality, he was just concerned about her ex-boyfriend pulling some crazy shit on her. But just then, Zuli's good mood was suddenly ruined when she saw Duyu standing by the school gate, waiting for her with a bouquet of flowers in his arm. Her eyes widened and her legs trembled in fear like she had seen a ghost, and forced her frozen body to run away from him. But he cornered her in a back alley anyway. Duyu's leveraged their past relationship to make her mother financially support their company because it was going bankrupt. But Zuli only kept her head down and meekly agreed to his demands. The next day, she skipped school and holed herself up in her room. But her mother only interpreted this as her usual tantrum, and left her by herself, paying no attention to what she said about a guy stalking her. Alone with her thoughts, she was reminded by what Yun said to her that night, that she needed to change herself to bring about a new outcome. So when her phone rang, she immediately picked it up and screamed at Duyu's to fuck off, but he threatened to harm Haoyi if she didn't meet his demands, and hung up before she could protest. However, she fell for his trap, and got taken away in a van to an abandoned warehouse. Completely helpless in Duyu's hands, she tried to stay strong by telling him that Haoyi would save her and call the police. But he said that the police won't find her because she was an adult who only went missing 2 hours ago. Plus, he was her ex-lover and she has a history of being a troublemaker, so no one would concern themselves in her case, at least not for a long time. Since his attempt to ask her mother to support his company fell on deaf ears, he settled on taking nude photos of her to use as blackmail. But luckily for her, Meitada saw where she was taken to earlier and brought Haoyi to her rescue. Thinking the punishment for illegal detention was not enough for Duyu's, Haoyi thought of adding a few extra criminal cases on his tab to really punish him, at the cost of his own safety. After that, he entered the warehouse by smashing through the windows and landing Marvel superhero style before them. But seeing the scratches on Zuli's knees and her ripped dress, he became overwhelmed by anger. However, Duyu's was quick to use Zuli as a shield, and used his goons to beat him up, without knowing that Meitada was just above them recording everything on her phone, while she stifled her cries. Enduring one hit after another, Haoyi resisted the urge to fight back, but when one of the goons used a foldable chair to hit him, Zuli stood in his way, and got hit instead. Blood oozed from her head and dripped down to the floor. Reverting back to her usual yandere personality, she finally bit back against Duyu's weak-ass threats, and revealed that she never actually loved him. She remembered how the rift between her and Haoyi started when she first slammed the door on him, because her mother told her that if she wanted his affection, then she should be better than him at everything. As a child, she took this advice seriously, but he was just simply better than her until he finally gave up and let her win. Although her mother showered her with praises for excelling at everything she did, she never felt happy, because she and Haoyi kept drifting apart. But her pride wouldn't allow her to confess to him, so the misunderstanding just continued on for years. Back in middle school on Valentine's Day, Zuli brought handmade chocolates to give to Haoyi, but when she bumped into him in the hallway, she denied that they were for him out of embarrassment, and stomped away angry, telling him that she would just give it to one of their seniors. While she was crying in the classroom, she spotted Duyu's below through the window, and decided to give the chocolates to him on a whim. This meant that Haoyi was never the substitute for Duyu's for her. Instead, Duyu's was the rebound guy from the very beginning.
Sensational.
Zuli finally let go of the words she had been meaning to say to Haoyi, and said "I love you" while she teared up. There was no way Duyu's could accept any of this. His pride wouldn't let him, so he made her remember the humiliation she went through at their New Year's party. But Haoyi has had enough of his shit, and apologized to Zuli for being so passive all these years, and for losing himself in his temper, so much that he couldn't see her feelings for him. She buried herself in his chest, while he stroked her head, relishing in that moment in their own little world, as Duyu's exploded in shame and anger in the background. Before he could retaliate, Meitada sent the recorded video to every phone in the city, exposing his scheme. Haoyi returned all the blows to the goons with his smooth kung fu moves, while Zuli beat the crap out of them further until they foamed in their mouth. Soon after, the police came to arrest them and led them away in handcuffs. Duyu's, being a sore loser, somehow grabbed hold of a knife and lunged at Haoyi, catching him off guard, but Zuli shielded him from the blade and got stabbed instead. The police screamed for someone to call an ambulance, while Haoyi pressed his hand over her wound, desperately trying to stop the blood from pooling out of her stomach. Abandoning her mask on the brink of death, Zuli confronted him with all honesty, as she told him that she loved him and thanked him for everything, her blood-stained fingers gently brushing his face before losing life. At the hospital, Zia tried to comfort Haoyi, who was blaming himself for not noticing her feelings sooner, because if he did, he believed that they wouldn't have been in this situation. She told him that this wasn't his fault, because people often become timid with expressing their romantic feelings the stronger they feel for someone, so she believed that Zuli couldn't have told him directly either. When Zuli's parents arrived, her mother hit him and blamed him for putting her daughter in a hospital bed. But her father had a calmer attitude, and pulled him aside to ask what really happened. After telling him everything, he thanked him for helping his daughter and told him not to blame himself, because he and his wife were partly to blame since they haven't been paying attention to her all this time. However, his soft gaze was not enough to melt the anger in his heart, but he snapped out of it when Zia came to inform them that Zuli had woken up, making him rush to her room with tears in his eyes. But his heart sank when she couldn't remember who he was. Her parents left to call a doctor, while Zia closed the door to give them privacy. Zuli had her guard up, hiding her face behind a blanket even as Haoyi sat on her bedside. His smile had a hint of sadness in it when he reintroduced himself as her childhood friend, who got her into this mess because he was weak, and promised that from now on, he would protect her forever. This moved her to tears and threw herself at his arms, whispering that she'll remember his words with all that too familiar yandere voice. It turned out she was just pretending just to get him all to herself.
God damn it! You can't make this shit up!
But she got busted by the other girls who came to visit her. For a moment, everything was back to their rightful place, until a white-haired girl crashed the party. The girl's name was Ling Xiaodu, Haoyi's cousin, who appeared to be head over heels for him, and clung to him in a way Zuli did. But even so, there was something different about her affection towards him. Her appearance stirred up the harem, turning the hospital room into a tiger's den from their menacing aura. Before the room became a war zone between women, she and Haoyi escaped and ran at full speed to his apartment, where they spent the night together. The next morning, Sandy unexpectedly visited Haoyi in his home, unintentionally bringing with her a crowd of reporters looking for a scandal. Apparently, Xiaodu was a big fan of hers and immediately forgot how angry she was at her for being close to him. But while Haoyi was grateful for her sudden visit, he was down in the dumps thinking about being the star of a scandal once more. So, Xiaodu came up with a plan with Sandy to outwit them, and made him dress up as a girl to pose as Sandy's female friend whom she came to visit. At school, he was once again the center of trouble when Xuan loudly accused him of sleeping with his cousin, after Xiaodu lied to her and the girls about what happened to them last night. Unlike before, Haoyi didn't bother to clear himself of their doubts and accusations, because he was already sick of all the shenanigans that the harem put him through. Later on, Zia called Xiaodu on the rooftop to ask her about what was going on between her and Haoyi, about the root of the problem with his parents and so on, surprising Xiaodu that she knew so much about Haoyi's secret. This spurred her to get more aggressive on her, making her back away and trip, and declared that she was Haoyi's first girlfriend. After that, Zia discussed this with Yuan and Xuan, who were at a loss for what to think of it, and decided to ask Zheng Dong about it when he passed them by, but he only gave them a vague answer. He only said that Xiaodu and Haoyi did in fact have a relationship, but it would be better if they would ask him directly, since by now, they should already know Haoyi's character, and they shouldn't be having doubts about him after all this time. Xiaodu was listening in on them from a nearby alley, and invited them for a drink in the cafe, where she spilled everything about her relationship with him. At the same time, Haoyi also told Meitada his relationship with Xiaodu, explaining to her that although she might appear as mean-spirited, she was actually a kind and gentle soul. After the attempted kidnapping incident during Haoyi's childhood, Xiaodu found a heartbroken Haoyi waiting alone in his apartment. He just threw away his precious police badge in the trash, along with his dream to become a policeman, because his dad never came to his rescue when he needed it most. Although Xiaodu didn't fully understand, she tried to distract him from his tears by asking him to play games with her, or even tell her a story. But the wounds in his heart ran too deep. In a stage drama during summer, Haoyi was once again alone because none of his classmates wanted to partner with him, and his aloof teacher only scolded him not to waste everyone's time by making them wait for his performance. Each second that passed felt like an hour to him, but all his worries disappeared when Xiaodu, who agreed to take on the girlfriend role for the play earlier, arrived in a cute dress to cheer him up. Ever since then, Xiaodu has looked after him as if she were the older sister, even though Haoyi should have been the one acting as the mature and strong older sibling. She even bridged the friendship between him and Zheng Dong by forcefully dragging him back to the classroom when he skipped his cleaning duty. He overheard Haoyi covering for him when their teacher scolded him for the classroom still being dirty, despite it being after school hours already. So touched by his kindness, he helped him clean up like he was supposed to, and became friends soon after. Eventually, she had to go study in the US, and would only occasionally return to her hometown to visit relatives. The girls eventually understood her intentions, and apologized for misunderstanding them. This time around, Zyadu came back to visit Haoyi specifically because she was worried about him. But finally getting to know the girls, she was happy that he now has friends to take care of him. They saw her off at the airport, after she just decided to return to the US, and boarded the plane without saying goodbye to Haoyi. She sent him a text message from her seat on the plane, telling him how happy she was that he's not alone anymore, and apologized for leaving without saying goodbye, sighing as she turned off her phone for the flight. However, the girls didn't allow him to give up, even when he knew that he wouldn't make it even if Sia drove him there in her car, because he himself never gave up when the girls needed his help. Now, to return the favor, they all drove fast and furious style in different cars to get him to where Zyadu was, with Zuli joining in on the high-speed chase by intentionally crashing into the patrol car that was hot on his heels. Sia even ordered her driver to blast through the barricade and take an illegal shortcut to the orchard just to get to the plane, with Meitada providing additional support with her magic. As the plane took off, Haoyi called out to Zyadu through the sunroof of the car as it drove parallel to the aircraft, while Meitada used her magic to send his voice directly into Zyadu's ear. When she finally looked at him through the plane window, her eyes immediately welled up with tears. At that moment, even if he didn't say it, she knew he was going to be just fine. But Haoyi told her anyway that he was doing great, and that she didn't need to worry anymore, the wind carrying his thanks to his dear friend who was long out of sight now. As the sun set behind him, his harem greeted him with a smile on their faces, as they assured him that everything was going to be just fine because they have his back. But after that touching moment, Zuli took the chance and went for a kiss as usual, starting another fight with Xuan, with the girls adding more fuel to the fire by joining in the chaos as usual. From the god realm above, Meitada fondly watched over him, as she said that he still hasn't dealt with all of Cupid's chocolates, so their journey was still far from over. Watch this next video. Till next time, my fellow legendary plot masters.